In a letter to his dear friend Lucilius, the Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "There are more things, Lucilius, likely to frighten us than to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Chronic worriers tend to be more occupied with the future, what is to come, than with the present circumstances. During the day and even at night, our thoughts delve into the mysterious realm of what is to come, loving, planning and calculating strategies of how to cope, of how face an unfortunate situation or destiny that may arise and may never come to fruition. We spend hours thinking about the what if. What if I discovered a betrayal by my wife or my husband? I don't know if I would forgive. What if I were fired this week? What will I do with my responsibilities, rent, card bill? And if they say anything, I will respond immediately, I will not accept insults. What if the investment goes wrong and I lose all my money? And if I lose the house? What if my car is stolen? What if I don't do well in the presentation? I could lose the customer account. And if my business doesn't work out, I'll have to go back to looking for a job. Even if we want to control the future, we can never go beyond the limits of the present. The reason is clear, the future does not exist except in our minds. We cannot live in the future, and we cannot predict the developments that are to come. Of course, we can plan, and planning is different from worrying. The ability to plan for the future is a pillar of our civilization. The human race would never have prospered if we had not organized, arranged, designed, prepared, and delayed gratification for greater causes. Consider the grandeur of the Nur, a colossal cathedral in Cologne, Germany, whose construction began in 1248 and was only completed around 1880, after interruptions of approximately 300 years. Generations dedicated their lives to something they would not see completed, demonstrating how long-term planning can result in extraordinary achievements, such as traveling to the moon and possibly undertaking a manned expedition to Mars. But there is a fundamental difference between planning and worrying. Do you agree? How do you find the balance between these two extremes? Comment your experience here, as your vision can inspire and help those who get lost in worry. Planning is constructive and focuses on our own actions in a conceptual future. Meanwhile, worrying is trying to control the uncontrollable, repeating possible and even unrealistic scenarios over and over again. Our worries may even consist of fantasies that are completely disconnected from reality. Therefore, unlike planning, worry is destructive. Yet we keep worrying because for some reason we think it will help us in some way. Unfortunately, worrying often does more harm than good. The problem is that, in the present moment, a situation for which we have created hundreds of possible outcomes unfolds in only one specific way. Furthermore, the chances of this situation not even occurring are high. We could come up with 1,000,000 possibilities and still be wrong. What is the point of the impossible task of figuring out exactly what the future will bring? There is no point, as author Eckhart Tolle states. Worry pretends to be necessary but serves no useful purpose. Yet many of us focus our attention on the unknown and fantasize endlessly about the things we cannot predict. Modern anxiety is fundamentally based on worries about things that will never happen. Some psychologists claim that modern anxiety is based on 5 categories of worries, 4 of which are imaginary. Only the 5th concerns concerns that have a real basis, but these occupy only 8% of our total daily concerns. In other words, we are true masters in the art of worrying about nothing. And these concerns feed present fears, whether real or imagined, revealing a truth that is as evident as it is difficult to assume: most of our worries have no basis in reality. But that doesn't stop its effects on our daily lives from being devastating. Cicero, the great Stoic philosopher, already noticed our tendency centuries ago to focus on the negative aspects of situations and worry excessively. He explained that animals run away from the dangers they encounter in their reality, and once they have escaped, they no longer worry. Yet we are tormented by the past and what is to come. Our blessing hurts us because memory gives us back the agony of fear, while prediction brings it about prematurely. He meant that our mind is continually moving between the past and the future, between the mistakes and disasters we have experienced and the mistakes and disasters that could happen to us. This fact was mentioned in his correspondence with his friend Lucilio, later published as Letters from a Stoic. He countered this often tiresome and destructive stance toward the illusory grasp of the future with Stoic reasoning, explaining that worrying about it is pointless and advising on what to do instead. This video explores Seneca's antidotes to worry and unfounded fears. Before we move on, like this video, subscribe to the channel and watch until the end to discover all the antidotes for worry. The idea that the future does not exist does not deny the passage of time, does not deny that what is happening now will soon be past, and that we are constantly exposed to a flow of newness, like a mountain facing a heavy and lasting rain. The storm cannot be controlled, it comes from all directions and at different speeds, bringing with it winds and even the unknown of all shapes and sizes. The mountain cannot predict what is to come, she can only endure and watch the rain showers come and go, just as we watch the moments come and go from what we call the future to the past. So we know something is coming, but no matter what we try to do with it and how well we try to prepare for it, we will always be shooting in the dark. This is why the future, as we imagine it, has no basis for actually happening, as it is nothing more than ideas that vary from wild guesses and prognoses based on past results and experiences. However, many people are overwhelmed by these ideas, causing them to suffer from unfounded fears based on nothing but speculation rather than truth. Imagine that Julia, after experiencing failed relationships, starts a new relationship with Dennis, since he presents himself differently. However, your worries persist in appearing, living completely in the world of what if. Julia is consumed by uncertainties and unfounded fears, and if the relationship ended in failure once again, perhaps I don't have the right to experience great love, for sure, he will betray me. In the midst of this mental turmoil, Julia neglected the future that often escapes human control, unfolding in unpredictable ways. Unfounded expectations and fears began to harm her relationship with Dennis, creating self-sabotage based on assumptions, not real facts. Julia's story exemplifies how unfounded concerns rooted in past experiences can distort perceptions of the present and cast a huge shadow over the future. By freeing herself from these apprehensions, Julia could open space for building a relationship based on present reality, allowing destiny to reveal itself. The example was a relationship, but it can happen in all scenarios in life. How many times do we start a new job carrying the bad experiences of the old role? As Seneca stated, truth has its defined limits, but that which arises from uncertainty is left to the guesswork and irresponsible license of a frightened mind. He noted that some things affect us before they appear, and others affect us when, in reality, they will never happen. According to Seneca, this happens because we are habitually exaggerating, imagining, or anticipating sadness. Seneca's letter continues to describe the nature of the mind, telling Lucilius that it sometimes creates false forms of evil when there is no evil to be found. Or, as he states, she distorts to the worst construction some word of doubtful meaning or imagines that some personal feud is more serious than it really is. Considering how angry the enemy is, what extremes he can go to if he is angry. This human habit of worrying is not just unpleasant, there's plenty of scientific evidence to suggest that worrying can literally make people sick. This means that even though the future doesn't exist, we are worrying and getting sick because of it. Fortunately, Seneca's writings provide us with antidotes, whether the afflictions are real or imagined. Now, what antidotes did Cicero propose to combat this human habit of worrying? Its remedy boils down to strengthening the mind with certain ideas and truths about reality, in addition to changing the attitude we adopt in relation to luck and misfortune. Firstly, he reminds his friend Lucilius of the fact that although many unfortunate things have overtaken him, he has always stood firm. So, it seems that somehow he has always been able to deal with everything that has happened to him. When we look at the history of our own lives, we can conclude that what we perceive as an anticipated catastrophe often turns out to be different from what we imagined. We often suffer less than we anticipate. The irony is that most suffering happens before the actual event occurs. For example, we're excited to take a test and weeks before we worry about it every day. Am I going to fail? Am I going to mess up? Am I going to be too nervous? But the anxiety we experience during the exam pales in comparison to what we endured in the weeks before. The root of this fear lies in our beliefs about the consequences of failing the test. We may think, if I fail, my life is over. Or if I don't pass this test, then it's true what they say, I'm really weak. But these beliefs are not true, simply because the consequences they anticipate have not yet happened and cannot be predicted. Even if some catastrophic beliefs about the future are plausible, since they have not yet come to fruition at this very moment, when we are disturbed, or as Cicero stated, we can retort with the question, how will I know if my sufferings are real or imaginary? Here is the rule for these matters: we are tormented by present things, or by future things, or by both. As for present things, the decision is easy. Suppose that your person enjoys freedom and health, and that you suffer no external harm. As for what might happen in the future, we will see later. Today there is nothing wrong with that. In the same letter, Cicero encourages his friend Lucilius to be careful with external influences when it comes to his personal situation. According to Seneca, it is best to trust ourselves and take counsel with our feelings independently, as we know our affairs better than anyone else. We are easily affected by other people's opinions and views. There are many people with narrow and even delusional views of reality, claiming that they can predict the future and promptly planting their seeds of fear in our minds, leaving us uneasy about the situation we are in. Therefore, we have to be vigilant in not wasting our mental and emotional energy with these bad influences. Seneca urges his friend to consult reason to see if it does not turn what is not an evil into an evil. The antidote is that we carefully discern between imagination and reality. As soon as we discover that our fears are based on irrational thinking or fantasies, or exaggerate our worries, they disappear. The problem arises when we want to control the future. To control the future, the mind tries to think of it as if it were the present. The mind somehow thinks that by calculating all possible options it will gain control in the end. If we knew exactly what would happen, we would actually have an advantage over our own actions. We would know, for example, when our relationships would end and what actions we would need to take to become rich. However, the future is still out of control. The only difference is that we already know what happened, which makes it the same as the past, and we can't control the past either. The only thing we can control is our own actions in the here and now. One cause of procrastination, for example, is the inability to step away from the past and future and focus on the task at hand in the present moment. We can create a new past and influence the future, but this requires us to keep our focus on what we can do now. By dividing a task into manageable parts, we can work in chunks that make it much easier to focus, forgetting about the end result for a while and thinking only in terms of hours, sessions, or days. It relieves us from the undermining weight of goals that seem nearly impossible to achieve while still working on them to the best of our ability. Worrying only stops us from taking action, and the longer we live in the future, the more our anxiety sabotages our efforts to make a change. As it is written in the Bible, in Matthew 6 verse 34, "Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Each day has enough problems, or as Seneca says about the brevity of life, you are organizing what is in control of fortune and abandoning what is in your control. What are you looking at? What goal are you striving for? The entire future is in uncertainty. Live immediately. Another antidote that Seneca proposes is a change in attitude towards what is to come. Seneca demonstrates a certain open-mindedness in his letter to Lucilius, urging him not to conclude too quickly about the nature of what fortune provides. In this case, fortune refers to the ancient deity Fortuna, the goddess of chance, luck and destiny. Looking at our human ignorance not only about what will happen and how these events will unfold, but also about the nature of these events and how exactly they will affect our lives, it is best to be careful when judging fate. In some cases, the bad luck we anticipated actually comes to fruition. However, events sometimes take such a radical and unexpected turn that, against all odds, we escape. There is a story that portrays what happens to people who judge based on what they don't know. This story tells about an old farmer whose horse ran away. After hearing the news, his neighbors came to visit and said it was bad luck. "Perhaps," replied the farmer, but the next morning, the horse returned accompanied by 3 wild horses. "This is wonderful," exclaimed the neighbors. "Perhaps," replied the old man. The next day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses, but he ended up getting kicked and breaking his leg. "What a misfortune," said the neighbors, full of sympathy. "Maybe," replied the farmer. The next day, military authorities came to the village to enlist the farmer's son into the army, but when they noticed his broken leg, they let him pass. Then the neighbors congratulated the old farmer, saying how lucky he was that his son was spared from the war. The farmer replied, "Maybe." This Taoist story shows that we cannot judge what is desirable or undesirable when it comes to present events because we do not know how things will turn out. Things that seem bad can turn into blessings, and vice versa. There is no point in wanting specific results if we cannot judge their value. Maybe losing a job is the best thing that could happen to us. Maybe losing our money will lead us to live a much happier life. We simply don't know, but it's comforting to remember that every problem brings with it an opportunity. "Even bad luck is fickle," said Seneca. Therefore, your antidote is to keep an open mind about the future, knowing that we cannot judge the nature of an event before it happens and its consequences are revealed. Let us then carefully examine the matter. It is likely that some problems will happen to us, but it is not a present fact. How often did the unexpected happen? How often did what was expected never materialize? And even if it is ordered to happen, what is the point of rushing to meet your suffering? You will suffer soon enough when this happens, so in the meantime, look to better things. Seneca does not mean that we should deny that bad things can happen. He does not encourage his friend to be ignorant of the terrible fates that can occur. He advocates observing carefully, as, on the one hand, it is unwise to deny misfortune, on the other hand, we must not let the slightest sign of adversity throw us into panic. It is essential to mention that worrying is terrible for our health. Worry comes from a place of fear and only breeds more fear, becoming a vicious downward spiral. Chronic anxiety resulting from worry affects the immune system and can lead to physical illness. And when we become more receptive to illness, we give ourselves one more thing to worry about. Being aware of the devastating consequences, combined with the knowledge that most of the things we worry about won't happen and that we can't correctly judge present events, we might want to prioritize our mental hygiene over all those things we can't control anyway. Therefore, the key is to walk the middle path between ignorance and obsession, consciously assessing the situation at hand and keeping all options open. Furthermore, If we keep an open mind about the nature of events, knowing that not everything is as it seems and that fate is as capricious as a summer storm, we will realize that our judgments about future and even present events are often mistaken, and our fears about them unfounded. And even if it is certain that doom is on the way, if it has not yet arrived, why spend time suffering in advance in our imagination? Now, comment on what is keeping you up at night and whether it is really worth your concern. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.